kick off the webinar and the presentation now. Let me begin by thanking you all for being here today. My name is Matt Friedman. I'm the CEO of the Mekong Club. For those of you who don't know the organization, we work with the private sector in a positive, supportive way to help banks, manufacturers, retailers, the hospitality sector to understand the issue of modern slavery and what needs to be done in order to address the problem. This particular webinar will be focusing specifically on human trafficking into scam centers and the scamming industry as well. We put out a survey about 3 months ago asking for feedback on what our community felt was needed, and they wanted to better understand what was happening with the scam centers and so forth. So to begin with, what you see on the screen here is KK Park, which is one of the more notorious scam centers. The center that you see here has about 40,000 people who are in this particular facility. What you're looking at here is Myanmar. The river that is next to the scam center is actually divides Thailand and Myanmar. So you can see how close this particular facility is to Thailand. To give you a general sense of the fact that this infrastructure is there, for this to happen, there needs to be financing, there needs to be construction, there needs to be social media aspects of this, which means that financial transactions take place in various support services, water, electricity, Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera. So there is an element of private sector-ness that has to be involved in these types of scam centers. And so in order to better understand how the private sector interacts with scam centers, the Mekong Club, the organization that I run, received some grant funding from the U.S. State Department. And as part of this funding, we were asked to do a number of things. Initially, to identify the types of companies that would be involved in potentially inadvertently supporting scam centers. We were then engaged with these companies. We reached out to them. We had meetings, consultations. We raised awareness by basically doing a series of presentations. And from this interaction, there was a certain number of people that approached us and said they want to be part of the analysis to determine how the private sector response can be done. And so we used that to develop typologies and so forth. That resulted in us to developing some e-learning videos as well as some documents. And as a result of this whole process, we eventually came in touch with Rosen International, who will be presenting kind of an automated approach to addressing this issue. But let me just go a little bit more into what it is that I was just saying. So banks obviously have to be concerned about this because they could potentially be inadvertently supporting various activities. The scam centers rely on legitimate bank transfer mechanisms. So a percentage of those companies don't realize that they are, again, inadvertently supporting scam centers. The crypto companies have a nexus associated with this in social media as well. In order to reach the companies, we shared with them a variety of materials that we had already developed, some television commercials, some e-learning related to how to prevent yourself from being trafficked into a scam center, how to prevent yourself from being scammed, and we developed some AI videos as well. All of these are in multiple languages in order to offer prevention mechanisms and tools and information to prospective people who might end up in scam centers. We also developed a job verification tool, which asks people who would be seeking jobs overseas to answer a series of questions. And then it basically identifies the potential risks that they have based on the answer to these questions as to whether or not this might be a fraudulent type of job. This resulted in us then having access to companies that allowed us to do trainings. Sometimes it was at a big conference, sometimes it was a webinar, sometimes it was a podcast. We did 31 of these presentations and reached over 6,500 people with 50 different companies. From that, this idea of kind of engaging with companies that had individuals that wanted to work with us, we had a series of consultation sessions for which we developed typologies related to human trafficking into scam centers and typologies related to the scams themselves. As a result of that, the typology helped us to develop a certain number of red flag indicators. I think we collected about 95 of them. And then we were able to translate this into a series of reports that we've written. One deals with airlines, another one with the scam centers themselves, another one with typologies that financial institutions should be concerned about, and finally, one related to cryptocurrency. And we also developed an e-learning curriculum to address the issue of red flag indicators and typologies related to human trafficking into scam centers. All of this eventually led into us working with Interpol in Singapore, where we compiled a number of people to have a brainstorming session to identify how the private sector can collectively come together to address the issue of modern slavery. What you see here is the first page of I think, a 12-page report. But to give you a general sense of what the consensus was, there were basically three objectives: creation and distribution of materials to prevent young people from being trafficked, looking at privacy elements to determine the extent to which information could be shared using a Singapore model. And the last one was to find ways to stop business-related resources from being used by the scam centers to help disrupt criminal activities. So as a result of that particular recommendation and the text that supported that, we came in contact with Rosen International. We had a series of discussions, and they talked about developing some type of a tool and a mechanism that would allow for there to be some automation associated with risk. So this is the genesis of how we got to where we are, and I wanted to share it with you to give you a general sense of this didn't just come out of the blue. It's a series of steps that culminated in us basically being where we are now. With that, I am going to stop my sharing and I'm going to hand it over to Lance and Pablo. Please just introduce yourself and your organization, and the floor is now yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate that, the setup. And Pablo and myself are excited to meet with all of you today and to have some of your time and kind of walk through our solution, which is the Modern Slavery Risk Radar. So really quickly, we're Rosen International. Essentially, what we do is we create SaaS and AI-powered solutions for some of the toughest data problems. And specifically for this issue, that we're facing. It's all around exposing enablement risk for modern slavery and human trafficking, right? And what does that mean? Well, we're going to kind of walk through that. Before I get there, though, let me introduce myself and introduce my partner, Pablo, whom you're going to hear from a little bit later. Um, Pablo is the CEO and founder of Rosen International, and he is a social and data scientist. So he's one of the most smart. He was one of the smartest guys I know. He hates it when I overcompliment him, but it's very true. He's got 20 years of experience, quantitative and qualitative research in modern slavery. So he's been at this for a long time, field experience across the world. And Pablo and I really met when we were working with the surveys that were being conducted in over 70 countries for the ILO to create the global estimates of modern slavery and the Global Slavery Index through an organization called Walk Free. Pablo was a technical expert for that program, while I was the project leader for that program. And we met, and we've been both working in this space for quite a while. I'm Lance Stevens. I'm the president of strategic partnerships at Rosen International. My focus is more on the business and the strategy side of things. I've got an MBA with an emphasis in social innovation and psychology, and over a decade working in this kind of space. And what Pablo and I really found is that through all of the work that we've done is that there's this dark side of the moon, or this other side of the coin, when it comes to the risk from modern slavery, called enablement risk. And that's what the tool is really aimed at solving and exposing, is where that enablement risk is. So the Modern Slavery Risk Radar is the tool that we have built. And again, it's harnessing power of data and AI to expose that enablement risk. And this is really illustrated through the scam centers like Matt talked about. And I'll set the table a little bit with that. And Pablo will walk us through some of the methodology and some of the elements of the platform, and then he'll demonstrate the platform itself. And we'll have a little time to discuss some of the features and get some of your feedback. We would love to hear from you as we walk through it. So just keep that in mind. And then we'll wrap up at the end. But first thing and most important thing is, what is enablement risk? So all of the people on this call, I'm sure you're very familiar with ESG risk. And enablement risk is kind of like I mentioned this earlier. It's like the dark side of the moon or the other side of the coin, right, of this ESG risk. But it's something that's often overlooked. So traditional ESG tools will look at the supply chain, right? They look at upstream suppliers, and there's tools that look at all sorts of types of risk. There's tools that even look at modern slavery risk. But the modern slavery risk radar, what it does, it actually looks downstream. It looks at how you may be supplying harm, who's buying from you, and are those services being misused? And the idea behind the tool is really to give information that will help risk anticipation and intervention, is the whole idea behind it. So Matt walked you through some of this, and some of you are probably pretty familiar with scam centers. Some of you probably are still learning about the industry, but it's no longer a fringe crime. It's a legitimate business, and there are billions of dollars that are being raked in through these scam centers. They're an industrial system, and they're all powered by legitimate businesses, which is the scariest thing, particularly for us and for, I'm sure, for all of you on this call. Um, they need telecom, they need finance, they need logistics, construction, utilities. The centers are built with steel and glass. They have elevators, they need IT, they need connectivity to the internet to work, and they need to use recruiting channels through traditional recruiting to trick people into thinking that they're getting a job and then abducting them and then torturing them, or even in some cases killing them to make sure that they do what they want them to do, which is steal a bunch of money that goes into the perpetrator's pockets. It's a pretty horrible system. The UN estimates there's over 200,000 young professionals that are trafficked through these centers currently, which is just staggering. It's the size of a small city. In the background of this slide, you can kind of see it here, this picture of KK Park that Matt Friedman was talking about. But it kind of just gives you the idea of the scale of what these scam centers are doing. And you can see the picture here. It's and this is just one. The tool that we've built, there's still so much to be done to develop it, and it provides a lot of great information. There's hundreds of cases that we have, and this is just one of them. This is just a picture of one that's well known. And so there's a lot that's going on here. And again, the most scary thing and the most important thing for us on this call is that these scam centers are reliant on legitimate business infrastructure to steal money and to traffic people. So I'll hand the mic over to my business partner Pablo, who's going to walk us through some of the specifics of the tool and what it does, and then we'll do a demonstration. Pablo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lance, for the introduction. And as Lance was saying, scam centers are embedded in legitimate supply chains. So they essentially require a ton of different services to operate efficiently. And essentially, you have a summary of the different types of services that we are focusing on for the development of this tool. And these cover some of the major buckets of enablement risk that we have identified. You can see examples here across these 5 different layers of enablement risk with the telecom and connectivity issue. For example, obviously, the scam centers in the region will require connectivity, will require internet service providers, will require all kinds of different telephone connectivity and so on. So there's a different number of suppliers that are potentially exposed to these enablement risks at a very high level, all the way from space. You have Starlink providing satellite-based connectivity, but you have also local suppliers. Additionally, you have all of the financial and payment-based enablement risk that affect a lot of the financial organizations in the region. It could include things from mule accounts in Thai commercial banks. All of the cryptocurrency industry is very ripe for this type of abuse because it enables risk in an anonymized fashion. You have casinos quite often involved in this situation because they have that cash flow going through them, which essentially makes it easy to launder the money from the scam centers and so on. Besides these two, you have also logistics and transportation. construction, real estate, and recruitment and human capital enablement risks. We're going to talk about a few of these examples as we look at the tool, and particularly as we look at some of the clusters that we can see emerging as confirmed cases. For example, the Mahesot-Myawaddy corridor. This is in the border between Myanmar and Thailand. Basically, a lot of transportation, a lot of cargo going through these areas. And as you will see in the map, scam centers tend to cluster in these areas where you are near a border, where you can make it a little easier to traffic people in and out, and also make it a little easier to get the supplies and the different operations that are required in those areas. But there's also a little bit of risk associated with special economic zones and the construction that goes on in those areas. That's where we see a lot of the clustering happening as well with scam centers, including enablement risk from SEC developers, from casino operators, real estate projects, and a very direct risk also for recruitment and human capital type of firms, because scam centers they disguise a lot of these recruitment tools as legitimate. So they may be using recruitment services, they may be using online services to advertise jobs. They are fraudulent ads, and they are bringing people in from internet advertisement, from online types of advertisement, more generally speaking. So these scam centers are weaponizing some of these platforms to abduct and enslave workers. So these are just some examples of how scam centers are exploiting legitimate businesses. And most of these businesses don't even know about it, right? So what we're trying to do here is to unearth, to expose this risk in a way that's transparent. And that's also quite thorough in terms of providing all of the different sources, all of the different sources of evidence that we have to demonstrate. So on the next slide, I'll talk to you a bit more about the Modern Slavery Risk Radar. This is a tool that we've built to help global brands, banks, telcos, companies in different industries to anticipate and act to mitigate this type of enablement risk. So the version that we're going to be sharing today focuses on scam centers, just an illustrative example, but the focus of the tool is broader. It's more focused on this umbrella term that we call modern slavery, which is including human trafficking, including forced labor, including child labor, forced marriage, different numbers of human rights abuses and crimes. So we're focusing on that broader umbrella term, which is this basically the space that we've been working on for the last 20 years or so. So this tool focuses on quantifying risk. We're using a 1 to 100 point scale with tiers of moderate, high, severe risk. We're also quite transparent about how reliable, how trustworthy we estimate these sources to be. So we classify different cases into low, medium, and high reliability based on the types of sources that we were able to identify. And then it identifies critical risk factors where legitimate corporate functions may intersect with scam ecosystems. So we're focusing in particular on recruitment, construction, real estate, special economic zone development, financial and payments, vendor network, supply chain, and telecom IT support. And we've basically bundled it into an interactive map that you can use for visualization, but also a dashboard and a case list view that you can use for more detailed case filtering and investigation of specific scam centers. And we also include some recommendations as to what touch points, what specific aspects of a scam center or a business operation to investigate that you can anticipate and minimize risk of enablement. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share real quick. Okay, let's see. Let me replace. All right. Okay, so this is the main view for the Modern Slavery Risk Radar. There's a number of tabs here. I'm going to be focusing on the Risk Radar map first to give you the overall geographic coverage of the current case study we're doing around scam centers. As you can see, we're only focusing on a limited number of countries in the Southeast Asia region because this is where all of the scam centers are clustering more prominently. And particularly, we're focusing on 4 countries. We're focusing on Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos, which have the largest number of confirmed cases of scam centers and pig butchering farms. So this is just an illustrative example, and it can be filtered through a lot of different menus on the left side here to identify specific types of risk, specific types of reliability, entity types, etc. I'll talk about those in just a second. And here you will see that there's quite a bit of clustering of cases in some specific areas. Each of these circles, they have different sizes, different colors. The size represents how many cases are clustered in that general area. The color represents the overall level of enablement risk, and darker color, darker red means a higher level of enablement risk. There's some gray circles as well here in some of these areas where we don't really have insufficient data, and we're transparent about these, but these are emerging cases that may have not been well documented yet, but are popping up in some sources and merit further investigation. And as we gather more data, we will include information, we will update these cases so that we keep the information updated and fresh. So let me just zoom in into one area here. One of these clusters is Sihanoukville. It's a very well documented cluster of cases of scam centers. As we zoom in, all of these clusters break down into the specific cases and they come into clearer view. And we can filter these cases so that we can make more targeted use of the information using some of the filters I mentioned earlier. The very first filter here on the left is the risk tier. So we have moderate, high, severe risk, and insufficient data. If we wanted to just focus on, say, severe cases, we would filter only for those. Maybe we could make that a little bit broader by including high risk cases. And that would allow us to see where they're located. We can also filter by source reliability, and I'll tell you a bit more about how we calculate reliability in a second. But for the purposes of this map, we can filter into high, medium, and low levels of reliability. Say you only want to focus on cases that have been well documented, well verified. There's a lot of them in Sihanoukville as a well investigated cluster of scam centers. But there's also quite a few where we only have some unverified or a single source. For those cases, there's not a lot of information, but as more information becomes available, we will be including them here. And finally, we can filter by entity type. And here we identify primary organizations. So these are the organizations that are primarily responsible for the human rights abuses in the scam centers. And these are the majority of the cases here. But we also identify wherever we have information about any associated companies that may be providing support or maybe acting as a cover or providing some other kind of enablement to the primary organization. We also include those on the map. So before we go into some of the specific cases here on the map, let me tell you a little bit about the methodology that we used. You can look at that, looking at this methodology tab, and this will give you the details on how we calculate the different factors and the different scores on this tool. We have, first of all, the scoring methodology on how we assess risk. And this risk is weighted based on different risk dimensions. We have 6 dimensions here, including financial and payment risk, recruitment, real estate, etc. And each of these dimensions is weighted according to how much we think that particular risk is driving the overall levels of abuse in this particular industry. And then we aggregate them with that weighted average to create an overall enablement risk score. We also have different risk tiers. So we're classifying into severe, high, or moderate based on the overall risk score, as you can see here. And this is quite important, I think. It's the data sources reliability score, which we calculate based on the type of source and their credibility of those sources. And we assign different points, different levels of reliability to different sources, as you can see on this table. So a government agency like the State Department or international organization or a UN agency would have a high level of reliability. As we go down the list here, we get to lower levels of reliability with Wikipedia, with scam databases that may not be completely verified, and these receive fewer points as we score their reliability. So then we calculate all of the sources available for source. We calculate how many points each of those sources would contribute towards reliability, and then we classify different scam centers according to their sources. And then we have industry-specific weightings as well to emphasize the different exposures for different types of industries based on what is their direct level of enablement risk that's more relevant to them. So let me go back to our map view here, and let's zoom in into maybe a specific case here in Sihanoukville. So there's this Golden Wealth Casino case here, for example, that as you can see here on the right, we have all of the information about this particular case. This has been verified, so this means that there's a very high trustworthy organization and a number of independent sources behind this case. And it shows a really high level of enablement risk, 79. It would be classified as severe risk that we would gather from 6 sources of information that have an overall reliability of score of 62, which would qualify as a high level of reliability. So for this particular case, we can see the individual risk factors by dimension further down the panel here. And we have the overall enablement risk, but then the scores for the different risk dimensions down here. So we have recruitment risk would be severe in this particular case, whereas real estate construction risk would be a little less severe because in this particular case, there weren't as much exposure to it. And finally here, towards the end, we have more of the actionable elements of what can be done about this particular case, and particularly about managing risk associated with scam centers. In this case, we have a few investigation touch points that risk managers and organizations more broadly can look into to audit whether they have exposure, whether they have potential enablement risk in this particular case. And these present a few obvious ideas for this particular case, including the risk of cross-border worker trafficking, because there's been a documented case of trafficking from China to Cambodia. In this case, there's that's a live channel that is operating for that case. Port access in Sihanoukville, it's more of a logistics point of view, and a few other different types of investigation touch points that you can use to audit enablement risk in this case. There's also a few filters that we can apply to this case in particular. So if you are in a specific industry, say you're in banking or financial services, you can filter to see what key factors would be particularly relevant to you as a banking or financial service company. So would obviously want to look into finance and payments and the level of risk there. So this might alert you that this case is particularly relevant as it has a severe level of risk for finance and payments, but also maybe looking at vendor networks and telecom IT support as additional factors to look into. And the investigation touch points are also filtered for your industry so that this becomes more relevant. So be looking at casino banking operations, cryptocurrency exchanges, and money laundering and things of that nature. And you can also apply, so not just to a specific case. If you go up the map, you can also apply these filters to the overall map. So you can filter your risk by industry, so that the scores here would update based on a given industry. So it's a little higher for banking, financial services, for example, than it would be for, say, real estate or construction developers. But also you can filter on specific risk factor. So if you're interested in financial payments, then you can see what specific cases have enough information for that type of risk, and what is the level of risk for that layer. Um, Let me just move over to the case list. This is a different way of looking at the data. It's a bit more operational from the point of view of looking at specific cases. And here we have the full list. We have the full database that is available for you to query and filter and for you to investigate. So say, for example, that you wanted to find information on a scam center for, let's say, for example, you heard in the news that there were $15 billion seized last October in connection with Chenzi and the Prince Group. So you wanted to investigate that case in particular. So you can search for specific cases here. Let's say that you wanted to look for Prince Group. That case will show up here. And it'll tell you what the location is, what is the general levels of risk and reliability, etc. And quite importantly, all of the different sources. We have 28 sources described in this particular case, and you can look at them and investigate them to find more details. They're all listed here, including the type of source, how reliable we deem it to be according to our classification, and the actual link. So for example, just some random web would provide a lower level of reliability from, say, a government agency like the UK government, Home Treasury, UNODC. These kinds of more official types of sources would carry greater weight. And that is aggregated here in the total score we provide for reliability. And we can then click on this and zoom in directly into the specific case here in Sienaville. So it will pop up here in one of the main locations. There are multiple locations for this particular case. So there's this one is pointed to Jim Bay Park in Sienaville, but there are other locations. This was a pretty large operation, so they span multiple areas in Cambodia, and particularly around border areas like Tre Tom and other areas in the country. Yeah, in this case, you can see this is also verified. It's a highly reliable case with a severe level of enablement risk. And you can see the different levels of risk for different industries. In the case of banking, financial services, we will look at finance and payments and vendor networks in particular. And we want to consider some specific investigation touch points. For example, say Prince Bank, which was owned by Shenxi's group. It's the most obvious financial enablement risk here. If you're using Prince Bank, you're probably supporting this scam center operation in some way. But there's also other interesting investigation touch points that you should consider. Cryptocurrencies, for example, and OTC brokers handling conversion of earnings from local currency to USDT or Bitcoin. That could be another interesting area to look into. Quite a few others here. Last tab that I want to show you is the dashboard tab. And this one basically provides a summary of all the data in the tool right now. We have a total of 239 cases that have been documented so far, of which 37 are considered severe risk, and 118 are high risk. There's quite a few where we don't have enough data yet, and as we continue documenting these cases, those would go down, or potentially would go up if more cases are popping up around the area. You can see the different levels of risk distribution, cases by country. In this case, we can see Cambodia and Myanmar are accounting for an overwhelming majority of the cases, but there are some cases in bordering areas in Thailand, special economic zone in Laos. There's a case here that is listed as actually registered in the Isle of Man, but operating in the region. So you may have also multiple locations for some of these cases. And finally, just a few other summary charts here on average risk, source reliability distribution, entity types, and data completeness. So this is just the beginning of what we're doing in this tool. There's a lot of data already in it, but this is only the beginning, and we're looking forward to continue expanding the use and the reliability of these sources, continue documenting more cases, and expanding the focus towards other areas besides scam centers and besides Southeast Asia. So I'm going to stop here. Over to you, Lance.
Perfect. Thank you, Pablo. I appreciate you walking through that. Let me share my screen and then we'll do a little bit of discussion and we'll wrap up, as we noted earlier. All right. So we're back into the slide deck. So I know there's quite a few of us on this call, and webinars can kind of go one of two ways. Either we can have a pretty good discussion and some great insights shared with people, or maybe you prefer to just reach out to us directly or leave some thoughts via email, and that's totally fine too. Either ways is we're very comfortable with. Right now, we'd welcome any and all feedback. Feedback's great. But in this stage, we're most keen to hear three things in particular. The analytical value, any thoughts on that? Practical relevance, how useful is the tool? And then any specifics around sector applicability. But again, we're happy to hear feedback in any of these forms. And if anyone's keen to come off mute and share some thoughts, we'll open up the mic, or if you want to use the chat, you can do that too. So I'll just give a couple minutes.
Lance, while we're waiting for that, maybe you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you would be using this tool eventually for human trafficking and forced labor and so forth. Just in a couple of sentences, could you get a general sense? Will it look similar to this, same source, same methodology, or do you think it'll be something different?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I think there's so much like Southeast Asia is where the tool focuses right now, and there's a lot of scam centers across, the wider continent and across the world too. So as we expand the tool, to be broader geographically, I think it would be very similar to what we're doing now. When we expand it to be more around modern slavery as an umbrella, I think that's where it may evolve in its functionality and some of the use, some of the scoring may change a little bit. But I think overall, the intent and purpose in which that is to provide reliable data that can be acted on with investigation touch points would stay the same regardless of some of those changes. Pablo, any thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah, so that's a very vast space, as you mentioned, Lance. There's and there's just so much information already, but it's constantly evolving, right? So where I think we want to go is real-time detection and warning systems where you can anticipate some of these risks before they become well known, well documented, right? We, as Lance mentioned, we work with a lot of organizations that are doing research in this space, like the Work Free Foundation and the ILO and other organizations. So they have very robust official survey programs, official research programs, and they provide a lot of data. But we want to be a little bit ahead of the game in terms of being able to identify and surface that risk before a year or two has gone by between data collection and the actual publication of results. So we are using quite a bit of automation and agents to ensure that we can be as responsive and real time as possible.
What I really like about this is having been in the sector for 35 years, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of newspaper articles, but it really hasn't been overly consolidated. As you indicated, Walkfree has done a good job of trying to get a general sense of what the size of the issue is, and they came up with the 50 million, and they keep analyzing and coming up with new methodologies and so forth. But it's focusing more on the victims than it is on the criminal activities and the potential vulnerability associated with that. And what I really appreciate about the tool is that what we now have is a general sense of taking whatever reliable data, and then qualifying and rating the data to determine the extent to which what we're seeing is real and not real. So by compiling it all together in one particular mechanism, rather than having to go off and use negative news filters and various other things, it just does all of that work for the organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I want to call out that one piece on the case filter. That's probably one of the most powerful, but maybe not the sleekest or the sexiest functionality of the platform is when you go in there and you look at the case list, you can click on the sources and then you can go in and kind of comb that information, which is a really nice way to aggregate the information and to do some investigation for those of you that are trying to find out like what's this all about, you know? So that's yeah, a consolidation of the information is a huge value add for it and the scoring for sure. And that's, I mean, what we're trying to do is just equip those that want to do something about the problem with the information that they need to make a difference, right?
So,
That's the whole
Lance, if
goal.
somebody wanted to kind of contact you to get additional information to keep up to date on kind of where you guys are in the development of this, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, good question, Matt. Let me just jump to this slide, to our next slide first, and then I'll jump right into that right after. So what we're doing with this tool, this is an illustrative case with Southeast Asia and the scam centers, like we said. It's, that there's a lot of enablement risk. It's a very new and developing problem, but it's very pervasive and very big already, right? Um, but building a future safe environment against enablement risk is something that we were hoping to do together with partners. So often overlooked, often a problem. Like obviously we've talked through a lot of this already in the webinar. But we want to expand that framework and extend it to other firms. So we're looking for, 3 to 5 organizations that we want to partner with to help test the model against operational decisions, identify more blind spots, get better data, information, and co-develop sector-specific applications. So if you're on the call and if this is interesting and intersects with your work, like let's have a conversation. And to your point, Matt, the way to get in touch with us, I'm going to share right here. 2 ways you can do that. One, you can scan this QR code and don't worry too much about trying to scan it right now if you're on your computer. Like Kat will send out a PDF version of this and you can go grab it there too. Or if you're more comfortable, you could just send us an email. Our emails are linked here as well. But we'd love to connect and try to build the future, build out the tool, provide the value, and make sure that, this enablement risk is something that's being addressed, within your organization and more broadly, to try to make a difference with this problem.
Yeah, there's 50 million people estimated to be in modern slavery, according to the Trafficking in Persons report. Last year, I
Mm,
think it was about 115 or 16 that were 1,000 that were actually helped, that were documented. A lot of people
Yeah.
come in and go out, but we're still probably at less than 1%. So what we're dealing with is an industry that has $236 billion generated from the criminal activity, of which a certain percentage of that gets into legitimate banks and it creates vulnerability of money laundering. We have also scenarios where you have a lot of organizations that are out there trying to make sense of this, but they don't usually have the data that they need in order to address this. So Walk Free has done an amazing job of basically consolidating that aspect of the projections. This has the potential to then encompass whatever information is available because AI allows us to track all kinds of things. We have perhaps access to World Check and World Compliance eventually that would allow for them to maybe link into this because they have all those articles related to human trafficking. So this idea of partnerships, and the Macon Club is a partner. I just want to
Mhm.
once again call out and thank the State Department, USAID, JTIP, and IOM, who have worked with us in order to move this process forward. Hopefully, we can get them to kind of move forward. And Interpol. Interpol has been kind of a leader, and they have been actively involved in addressing this particular topic for some time, and they were some of the earlier organizations that put out alerts associated with this. If we can link all of these organizations together, if we can also link the banking, the financial transaction, the social media, so that they're feeding into this, just imagine where we could be a year from now or 2 years from now.
Yeah.
That's really where I think the major innovations will come as a result of this type of tool.
Couldn't agree more, Matt. Yeah, couldn't agree more. We would love that collaboration. Yeah. And we really appreciate the time of everyone on the call today. So thank you so much for being here. Matt, we'll turn it over to you for any last words that you want to share
Yeah, I
before we
want to
close.
once again thank you, Pablo and Lance, for helping us. There's a short survey that we do at the end of this, so as you leave, the survey will come up. It really helps us to understand, the what it is that you guys are thinking, how you felt the survey went. It's anonymous. It allows for us to be able to just ensure that we are addressing your needs in the future and so forth. So I encourage you to please fill out those surveys. Um, any other questions, comments, statements? I'll give like a couple of seconds to see if anyone's going to say anything. With that, let's go ahead and end this event. Thank you so much, and appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Bye.